Hello, welcome everybody.
Yes, welcome. Looks like I have 1 p.m., Rebecca, and I think everyone is logged in. So shall I go ahead and get started?
I believe we're ready to get started, other than just a few brief logistical comments here. As we're going through the presentation today, if you would like to ask any questions, you're free to enter those into the chat, or we do also have access to microphone audio if you would like to use that. And I see we already have a hand raised, so we can answer that question if you have a question, Tristan. And it was possibly also just a test of raising your hand, which is okay. But if the question comes to you, please feel free to shout it out and we'd be happy to answer that. And so I am going to turn it over to Tracy. Thank you very much for joining us for this presentation today.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tracy with the Montana State Library, and Rebecca and I are partnering on this Count Week effort. And so today we are going to be talking about Count Week, what it is, when it's going to happen, and why we want to start this initiative. We are hoping this becomes an annual thing. We're specifically going to talk about a couple of components, the data collection piece and storytelling. And I will be talking a little bit more about the storytelling, the purpose and the value of it. And then Rebecca is going to take over talking about data collection. And then Lindsay is going to be joining us to do a demonstration and mini training about how to use counting opinions, which is one of the software pieces that we are using to collect the data. So to share our thinking behind Library Count Week, we want this to be a statewide initiative. We're hoping that during this week, public libraries will take time out of their day to collect data about usage and value of library services. It has both a quantitative component and a qualitative component. So we're looking at numbers, how many people visited the library, how many questions they asked, but we're also asking patrons to share information about what value they received from the library in their use. We're going to have this week in September 20th to the 26th, and then we want to have another one in March 7th through the 13th of 2027. And we're doing this for two reasons. The first reason is we really want to collect accurate data about library usage. And nationally, our peers have noticed that libraries that take these 2 weeks, basically twice a year, to really focus on these counts like library visits and reference questions and so forth, they get actually very accurate data. And then the other piece of this that's really what I was very interested in is being able to explain the value of the library and its services. And so that is the piece I would like to talk a little bit more about. And that is that storytelling component. One of the reasons I reached out to Rebecca was I had noticed how sometimes our public does a much better job about explaining why the library matters and how it adds value and richness to their lives. And so Rebecca and I were able to work together on this project to have that both quantitative and qualitative aspect. But what we need to do is take that qualitative information and we need to share it. And so that's when we came up with this storytelling idea. And we had worked with Mark Moss from Tell Us Something, who just introduced himself in the chat. And he's going to actually be introducing himself here in just a few moments. But he taught two workshops for us where he really went through what are the elements that create powerful stories, like stories that really resonate with us. And what I really appreciated about Mark and his approach is he taught us how to take everyday stories and turn them into really compelling stories that got at the heart of being human. And so we wanted to be able to take this qualitative data and help library staff and library directors and library board members be able to use it to share why the library matters and how it matters. And one of the things I would say about stories, especially when they're combined with those numbers and that quantitative data, is they humanize the usage of the library. They communicate why the library matters. They can actually be really effective at reaching local government and community leaders in a way that builds support. And it does it through that human aspect, along with the numbers that show and give a sense of how many people benefit from the library. And the other thing I noticed as I was working with Mark and planning for this is the stories reminded me, as someone who works in libraries, of the power of our work. And so there's actually also that reward as well. And so Mark is going to be teaching a face-to-face session in April where he's basically going to walk through those skills for how to tell a story and then use the data that we collect in our count weeks as a way of practicing and being able to share the value of the library. And he graciously said he would be willing to come and join us at this webinar and introduce himself. So Mark, would you like to just say a few words?
Sure. Mark Moss. Don't see a way to enable video, so I apologize if I'm supposed to be on camera.
You're good.
Great. So I do appreciate being able to work with the libraries. Oh,
Oh,
that is happening. Great.
there we go. You came back. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm a little. I've been doing projects all day that aren't related to work, and so I'm not dressed the way I wanted to be. But thanks
Okay.
for having me so much. I think that, a lot of times we get wrapped up in spreadsheets and data, and I'm right now in the midst of grant reporting, and we forget why we do the work that we do. And I worked with a group of folks, scientists, who were doing annual meeting, and I was hired to try to make it less dull. They're required to report what they've been working on all year. And all of them started by opening their laptops and showing me slides and graphs. And I was like, I'm watching paint dry. This is so dull. And I was purposely rude to them. And I just started like scrolling on my phone. And they're like, what are you doing? And I was like, what are you doing? You're wasting my time. Close your laptop. Tell me why this work matters. What brought you to this work in the first place? And every single one of them told me a story of why they care about fisheries, what is so interesting about birds or whatever. And so when we reach out to our patrons and say, like, what brings you to the library? Why is it so fascinating to you? What's valuable for you about it? That's when we really can make those connections. And when we do that for and with each other, we can be reminded of like, oh yeah, this is why I'm doing this work. And it's all through story. And, all the other data and all that stuff is important. And that we can just like send that in an email. But when we're talking to people who are making decisions face to face or on the phone, we can share with story. And that's also in grant writing. Almost every time I'm working through a grant, I'm like, how can I turn this answer to this question into a little snippet of a story in like 2,000 characters or, whatever the limitation is. And so the workshop that I run, I do it, it's extractive. So that means there's a lot, it's actually working. You guys are doing a lot of the work. I'm just a facilitator more than anything. I do talk about storytelling skills and structure and things like that, but mostly it's practicing how to do it, how to get the stories. And sometimes we use the data that, there's questionnaires that Tracy was talking about to get there. But sometimes it's just personal experience of like, oh my gosh, I had this incredible interaction with this woman who was super grumpy. You'll hear me say it if you come to the workshop. I'll give you this whole story, but I was working at Kinko's in Bozeman, midnight shift, and she would come in every night and she was super, super grumpy and I couldn't reach her. She didn't speak and she was only there for 5 or 6 minutes and would leave. And I tried everything. And long story short, we ended up copying our faces together And that's what broke her. And she started talking to me and smiling and laughing. Um, and that was like super connective. And it was like, okay, now I can go back to work and feel good about like running the copy machines because every job that I've ever had that I like, that I care about, had to do with human interaction. So that's what we'll be talking about in my workshop and how to get that across. I don't know if that was useful, Tracy.
Oh, it was very useful, Mark.
Great.
Yeah, thank you. That's
Yeah.
actually, I would share for those of you, if you have not taken one of Mark's workshops, he's just really an excellent teacher and very, very good at reading the room. And so he gives you like the building blocks, because I know I myself feel like I struggle with how to tell a good story. And yet when I took your session, Mark, I was able to tell a pretty decent story. And so I'm very much looking forward to that and looking forward to being able to add that skill set to us. And yes, Tony, that is what we are hoping, is that Mark will be at MLA April 2027. He's committed to it. We just obviously have to fill out the information for MLA. So thank you, Mark, for
Yeah,
being
no
here.
problem. Thank you. And anyone who wants to reach out to me for whatever reason, questions, feel happy to do that. I'll put my email in the chat here. Um, and yeah, happy to chat with you before we get to the conference. But I just want to pop in and say hello. And I don't know if you need me for the whole time. But
No, you
great.
are free to go, Mark. Thank
All
you.
right. Well, thank you all so much. And I hope you all have a great rest of your webinar.
Thank you.
All right.
Have a good
Bye.
day.
You too.
Bye-bye. All right. So with that, one thing that Mark also shared with me, and he mentioned it at the end of his presentation, is as you're getting ready for Count Week, and even during Count Week and afterwards, you might just start observing the people using the library. What are they doing? What do you see? What emotions do you observe? Because that's the basic components of storytelling, and it will all make sense and come together when Mark teaches his workshop. And so with that, I want to make sure that Rebecca and Lindsay have plenty of time to talk about their portions. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Rebecca.
Thanks, Tracy. And I just wanted to add, we're doing the two sides of this, the qualitative and the quantitative. And we've all interacted with that city council member or mayor or legislator that says, I want to know the numbers. And so we want to approach it from both sides and hopefully then be able to weave those numbers into your stories as well. So you're able to approach both audiences. And so now what I'm going to talk about is more of the practical side of this and how all of this is going to work. First, I wanted to mention that to help you with getting the word out to your patrons for collecting the qualitative side of Count Week, we have prepared different materials that you are welcome to use at your library. And at the end of this presentation, we're going to send them to all of you as well as to all the rest of the library directors using our Gov Delivery listserv. And I wanted to give a special shout out to two people who helped me with these materials. Um, if she has a camera, she can certainly give us a wave. The first person I wanted to mention is Leslie Miller. And Leslie Miller is our administrative specialist here at the Montana State Library. And he is also very gifted in creating different communications. And so I saw her raise her hand. I think that's her wave. But thank you very much to Leslie for putting together some of these materials. And so I'm just going to showcase what some of those look like. The first one that Leslie prepared is an image that is sized for Facebook. So you can post this on your Facebook site. I hope is that showing on my screen? It is wonderful. So this is an image we'll share with you that you can use for Facebook. It's the correct size so that it'll show up well in your social media accounts. We also have another article that we've written. You've probably seen the articles come through our MLN newsletter. Leslie prepared those as well, but this other article is patron focused. So if you have a library newsletter, we've created a blurb to make it really easy for you to include it in your newsletter. And then finally, Leslie created a printable version of the patron survey. I know in some communities, people are still very much into filling out things on paper rather than doing it on the computer, and that's just fine. We want to create an opportunity for them to participate as well. So we will make this available to you, and then you can scan it back to us, and we'll get all of those entries included in our results. I have another person on the call I wanted to recognize, and that's Colette. Colette helped us with creating a YouTube short. And I've been told that the kids don't use Facebook as much anymore, which is just fine, but they are looking at Reels and YouTube shorts. So what we're going to do is we will put the YouTube shorts up on our YouTube channel, and then you are welcome to reshare those to your own channels and with your followers. And I'm just going to preview this. We are working on a second YouTube short that can be during actual count week. This particular one is in the lead up to count week.
During Count Week, libraries across Montana are collecting information about how their communities use library services. Your participation helps demonstrate the many ways libraries make a difference. Connect with your local library to help us show how libraries count and communities benefit.
So thank you very much to Leslie and Clay for preparing those materials for us. We will also have a QR code flyer that you can place at your circulation or information desk that people can just scan with their cell phone. Which brings me to my next point, which is about the patron survey. The patron survey has been designed to be mobile friendly, so it pops up well on your cell phone, as most patrons will probably interact with the survey in that way. We will also include a link to it on the Montana Shared Catalog and through the Libby app if they would like to respond to it through those different services. And I am just going to take a moment here to preview what questions we'll be asking of patrons so that you're aware of what's going to be in that survey. So once they get into the survey, they'll have this landing page where they can click Start Now. It describes what Library Count Week is. They have a place to answer which library did they use today. Because we are sharing this through Montana Library to Go and the Shared Catalog, we also want that to include visits that may have been virtual or online services. Either way, they can respond to which branch of the library they were using. And then they have an opportunity to select some of the different ways the library may have helped them today. We've also given an option for other because I am sure there are different outcomes that we may not have already considered that they would like to report. Moving on, we have a question about how often do they use the library? In reviewing our survey, we thought it would be particularly interesting to know if a patron comes in and this is their very first time using the library and what type of experience they had and discovery they had through the library compared to maybe somebody who's using the library every month. On question 4, they'll have an opportunity to share a more in-depth story, or on the paper survey, they can flip it over and provide the more in-depth story. And then finally, sometimes patrons want to know or want to provide who they are so that, if they've provided a really heartwarming story and they want their librarian to know how much they mean to them, sometimes they would like to include their name, but that is an optional field. And so a patron is not required to submit that. And then once they click submit, we will receive all those responses. And at the end of the survey period, we share those back to you so you can use them in your story building. I did see a chat pop up. Oh, it's just an emoji. So good deal. Let's continue moving forward. All right, so now we're on to what questions will the libraries answer? So you may be familiar with the sections in the public libraries survey where you have the opportunity to provide either an actual count or an estimated count. And what we're focusing on is the estimated count. We've noticed over the years that there are inconsistent uses of the estimate. So some libraries may decide to estimate in 1 week, where other libraries are collecting across 4 weeks. So what we want to do is provide an opportunity for all libraries to collect in the same sort of way and to provide a tool for you to do that. And then we can use those estimates in the public library survey if you desire. So what we're going to be asking, the first is just a context question, which is how many hours is the library open to the public? So you'll have an opportunity to put how many hours you were open on that day. Then we'll also ask about library visits, reference transactions, number of uses or sessions of public internet computers, and Wi-Fi sessions. I skipped over one, which is the community resource referrals, because you may not have seen that question before in the public library survey. And that is a new addition that we wanted to do some testing on to see if we were able to gather some useful information. And when I say a community resource referral, what we're talking about is the amount or count of times that you help a patron figure out how to access the food bank, or maybe how to access tourism information or affordable housing. And so those are all referrals to different community resources. Those would also count in your reference transactions if you're providing more information to a patron. But this is a way for us to pull out how many of those are those types of referrals. I wanted to also note that historically in the public library survey, we just ask you to group all that in one big bucket for your entire library system. Through Count Week, we're giving you the opportunity to collect that at the branch level. And we know that there can be quite a bit of variation between library branches within a single system. Montana counties are large and experiences can be very different from community to community. So we're curious to see how visits and these different measures might compare at the branch level. And so there will be some more about that we'll go into during Lindsay's demonstration, but we'll be providing logins to each library director, and then the library director will also receive logins for their branches that they can share with their branch managers as well. And then how do we collect this information? Well, I mentioned counting opinions and Lindsay's demonstration, and we're going to get into that in just a moment here. But I wanted to talk about how you might organize this on the day-to-day before you enter it into counting opinions, because I know some libraries already have systems in place that they like for counting these different types of information. So, for example, you may have a clipboard at each of your information desks. You might have a clicker where you just count how many times people come in the building, or maybe you have a more technical solution like a door counter or a report from your Wi-Fi router. And you can use those numbers in whichever way you decide to collect them, and you can enter them into the Counting Opinions Count Week tool at the end of the day or in the next morning. You also have the option to use the Count Week tool as you go throughout the day. And I see Mary has a question. Are we tracking items like help with computers? So help with the computer could very well be a reference question, depending on what they're asking. So if they're asking for assistance with finding information using the computer and you go into an instruction kind of moment, then that would be counted in your reference. If it's something simple like, can you please release my print job? Those we don't necessarily count in our reference transactions, but that may be something you would want to count internally just to get at the volume of support you're providing to patrons. And I'd be happy to chat more after, Mary, if you have more questions about the differences between reference questions and other types of support. So what happens next? After we've collected this data, we're going to pre-populate it into your FY27 report and into those sections that I talked about that can be reported as an estimate. I did receive a question from a library before this presentation that I thought was an interesting question, and so I wanted to answer it on this webinar as well. What if your library takes an actual count year-round already? If that's the case, we're not going to lock that question, so we'll pre-fill your estimate, but if you have a better answer than the estimate because you've taken an actual count all throughout the year, you can edit it and put in your actual count instead. But we do want to make it easy and pre-fill those answers for those who would like to use the estimates. And then the other question is, what if we want to use the data before October 2027? The good news is we're going to provide all this data to you so you can use it right away. One of the biggest benefits of Count Week is having the most recent and immediate data available. I know for the public library survey, we often wait a full year before we have that data, and so it's lost some of its relevancy. Count Week gives it to you immediately, so you can start using it in your stories. All right, so at this point, I'm going to stop sharing so I can turn it over to Lindsay to do a demonstration of the Count Week tool. And I just want to briefly, Lindsay, you're muted, but I'm just going to introduce you. So Lindsay Thompson is the person that we work with at Counting Opinions. That's that same reporting system that we use for your public library survey, your library standards, and your Federation grant report. And so Lindsay over at Counting Opinions is helping us with all of those different tools that you use. And she's here today to talk to us about Count Week as well.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. Sorry, I actually can't share. I assumed that I could, and we should have tested this earlier, but it says that I don't have that ability. Oh, there we go. Thank you guys so much. I have the ability. I am going to share my screen. Perfect. Hopefully everybody can see that all right. And I'll review a little bit about what Rebecca has said, but here in the tool. So I have Count Week brought up right now. This is sort of what it's going to look like, but it has this little checkered line around it that just indicates that I'm in a test mode. So you can have this same ability. We can give out test links as well, so you can play around with it if you like. Here I am logged in as Phillips County, and I am at the system location. Let me see if I can move this a little bit. Let's move this down here. Okay, I have a system login. So some of you will get this where you'll get your system login, and then you'll have this select list over here on the top right-hand side where you can choose from the available locations. If you are a branch and you get your branch information, it will automatically select who you are and you won't be able to switch that. But as a system, I just want you to note that you'll automatically see this system total information, and you'll be able to drill down to a specific branch for more information or to be able to enter in any data. So as Rebecca had mentioned, the first question that we are asking is the hours open. And this is a great contextual question that we're asking. You know, how many hours are you open per day? If you weren't open as many hours, I would assume that your visits and reference transactions, etc., would reflect that. So this is an important piece of information. And here I have just entered in 8 along the board. And again, I'm using a week that it's not the count week. You're going to be using this twice, once in September and once in March. And so it will default to the week that you're using. It'll be locked down as well, so you won't have to worry about that. But just for today's purposes, it's going to load up this week for me. It is highlighting today, Wednesday, August 26th. So that's what's highlighted on my screen. And because this is contextual information that I'm pretty sure will be consistent for the week, I can enter this in advance. You don't need to wait each day to enter in your hours. But certainly if something changes, let's say there was an extreme weather condition, or maybe your library is within a municipal building and there happened to be a fire alarm that went off and you opened like a half an hour later than you are normally scheduled to, you can easily adjust these numbers. So I'll talk about that as well. But on the hours open, I have already entered in my hours for the week. It's going to tally automatically to a weekly total and automatically to a year-to-date 2026. And we've done some additional testing in here, so there's more test data than just that. So if there were an adjustment that needed to be made, I wrote in that we are open 8 hours today, but maybe it needs to be adjusted down by half an hour, let's say. 0.5. I can just make that adjustment and go ahead and add that information. Oh, it didn't adjust the 7.5. Maybe I don't have this set up as decimals. Oh, that's the problem. I don't have these set up at decimals yet, but we will set these to decimals for hours. So you'll be able to adjust any of those. Let's say, you know, there's an hour difference. You can subtract an hour from this total. So I just entered in a -1, and you see that it went down from an 8 to a 7. And I can view the information for this particular question, and it will show me all the values that were entered. So right away, starting off I entered in an 8, it was a blank, and I entered in an 8, and now I've entered in a 7. If you refresh your screen, it will show the date and time associated with those changes. So I'll just pull this one up again. And I'll be able to, again, just look down at the information, and it'll show me, at 12 p.m. today, I entered in an 8, and then at 3:30 today, I have changed that value down to a 7. This field also enables me the ability to add in a note or some accompanying information to this data. So I could put in a note that the hours were adjusted down due to an unforeseen closure, whatever the note may be. So you can add that in. As soon as you've added in a note or an annotation, your little notepad icon will turn a red color, indicating that there is a note that has been added on here. And you can see a record or a track of all those changes. So certainly if you already have a process in place, you can use that. But if you want to use this as a tracker, you can have this on your computer screen or on your tablet all day. And as folks come in and you enter in, I've gotten my first reference transaction, maybe I had a little rush and I had 3 more reference transactions. I can add in that 3. It's going to bring it up to 4. I've had somebody else come by now and I did another reference transaction. I'll enter in another one. It's going to automatically tally it to 5. So you can continue to adjust this throughout the day, and it will keep a record of all of those transactions. So you can tally that up throughout the day, and you can use this as your clipboard, if you will, or certainly you can enter those values at the end of the day. Again, if you make any errors, if you type in the wrong figure on the wrong day or for the wrong transaction, you can always adjust down. So let's say I accidentally entered in a 20 instead of a 2, then I can go ahead here and subtract 18 because I meant to enter 2 and not 20. And then it's going to bring it right back down to where I want it to be. So there's nothing that you can really do wrong here. It's very flexible if you do make a mistake, and you can use that again as sort of like a daily tally, and you can click into that information, that eye icon, to always see the history of that data throughout the day. So either way, if you want to keep this on you, keep it up and keep your tally in here, this is great. Does the work for you. You're just going to want to make sure that you have entered all the information in here. Ideally, by the end of the day, that keeps the most accurate records. And you want to make sure that you get every day correct for all your numbers, and then it will automatically tally up at the end of the week. Of course, I can adjust this at any time, though. It's Wednesday. I've got Wednesday highlighted here, but I'm over here on Sunday making adjustments. So you can certainly go ahead and do that. And again, you can track all that information. So if you can see exactly what you entered. If there was an error, you can go ahead and adjust it. And again, there's that notes field. You can enter as many notes as you like. So maybe you have notes about multiple transactions. Again, that will tally. As soon as I refresh, all the date and times will be listed there. So it's really simple. You just have these 2 options. You can review all the information or enter a note with the eye icon. You can add or subtract just by adding in a minus sign to the counts as you go. There's also a little information or question mark sign over here, a little button, and you can click on that to view more information about the definition. So what is this all about? And it will tell you sort of the definition of what you will put in here. So that can be helpful as you start entering your data in. And again, as I enter in information here, it's going to automatically tally to my weekly total and my year-to-date total. So you'll be able to see that as you go. So quite easy to do. There is a tab for each section of the survey. So you'll be able to click on that tab and view the questions that it's asking you for. You'll see all the days of the week listed there. And again, best, I think, for data practices to make sure that you're inputting that data either on a continuous basis during that day or at the end of the day, so that you have that tally in there and you're not confused with any of your check marks. Are they for Wednesday? Are they for Thursday? It's always nice to be able to have those memories and data there day of. And that's the great thing about the notes as well. Oftentimes, I think I'm going to remember something, but am I really going to remember what happened on Wednesday, September 20 something, when now it's March of the following year? So these notes, this context is really helpful in being able to go back through the data to tell a bit of a story about it, what happened, why the numbers changed. So you can have all that information there at your fingertips. Again, you can add as many notes as you want. So you really can use this tool as your continuous tracking system. So the things to note most, here in my URL, I have a test URL right now. So we'll likely give you this ability to test things. When you're outside of the test URL, you're not going to have that little checkbox around the tool. So you'll just see this. I am here as Montana, so I'm going to have to search for a location to find one, but you as the system, this is automatically going to be selected for you. Phillips County, you're going to have a login. It's going to take you to a link that will automatically have you selected, and you won't be able to select any other library system. But at the system level, as I mentioned, you will have this drop-down available. So you're not going to be able to enter anything into this all locations total. You'll only be able to enter things at the branch or central library or bookmobile level. So this is the first time I've selected that one. So it's just saying this is your first time entering data here. So that's one thing to note if you are a system. Again, if you are a branch, it's going to automatically select you. If you are the Saco branch library, then it's automatically going to have you listed here, and you won't be able to change that selection if you're logged in at the branch level. So just something to note at the system level and the branch level differences there. Are there any questions? Yeah.
Yes, perfect timing. We have actually a couple of questions, and some were vibing and had the same questions. So that's perfect. The first one was, do we have to fill this out daily, or can we fill for several days at a time? And I'm going to go ahead and answer that one. So in some of our smaller libraries, I am well aware how busy it can get, and no problem if it needs to be entered the next day. That's okay. As long as we get all those responses in by the end of the week, we'll be good to go. But as Lindsay said, the closer you are to when it actually happened, the easier it is to keep that data straight. And then the other question I'm going to leave for you, Lindsay, which is how many people can be logged in at a time per library? Could they have this open on multiple computers if they have multiple points of access for patrons?
Absolutely. Yes. So you can keep this open. Maybe there's a couple of reference desks, but then somebody else is entering in the computer sessions. Absolutely. It's all logged. In here, again, you'll get a listing of all those changes, so you can have as many people as possible. And you can technically, as Rebecca said, you can enter things like here I am on Wednesday. Again, Wednesday's highlighted, but I was able to add in hours for the entire week here. So you can go back and add information, particularly if you have other systems, like if you have a gate counter, for example, you can just enter in that information before the end of the week. Or hours, again, is something that's fairly contextual. You usually know in advance, but of course, if there's an emergency or something that occurs, you can certainly adjust those down if need be later in the week.
And then,
so please have it open on multiple, give it to all your staff. Absolutely.
Wonderful. And then we had a question about finalizing entries and whether there would still be access all the way through the following Monday. And yes, that's fine. You will still have access if you need to go in and finish entering your information. I'll wait to pull the data for a few days after that period, so that way everybody has time to finalize. And then there was also a question about events. So we are not keeping track of events during count weeks through this specific tool. But I do encourage you to keep track, because you will ultimately enter those in for your public library survey. And you may want that information to supplement your stories that you're going to be building later. And then there was a question about a branch being closed during that week and how you should enter hours. And yes, that is correct. You should just enter 0 for your hours, and that will be very clear to us about what's going on. You can always add a contextual note as well. And then I believe we have one more question is what happens if two people are trying to change one field at the same time?
It will tally both of them. So as you it'll pop up on your screen, you'll enter your information, they'll enter their information, and it will all be listed here on the information screen, both of those entries. Because we do sort of like an addition count, it's a little bit different than LibPaths. In LibPaths, you can certainly have multiple people logged into the survey at the same time. But because we just hold one count, if you both happen to be on visits, clicked into the visits field on LibPaths, like the PLS annual data form at the same time, whoever exits visits last will have their data saved. Whereas this is different because we're just adding to the count and we're keeping every single change in this change log and this information where you can have all this data. So it will just include both of them. So if somebody's at one reference desk and they've entered in 2 reference transactions and you at the same time enter in 1 reference transaction, that's just going to tally to 3.
I believe that's all the questions I'm seeing at this time, so we're good to continue.
Okay, perfect. Well, I think I've done an overview of everything. I can certainly go over it again. As mentioned, the systems are going to be automatically selected, but if you do have a system login, you will have this option over here on the right. If you're a branch, it'll just be automatically selected, and you can double check that your library system and your branch name is correct. You'll have this question mark option to view the definition of the particular question. And then you can just go ahead and enter your data. And hopefully it's fairly straightforward. Again, we don't want to be intimidating in any way. Certainly errors happen when you're inputting data and you can accidentally, select the wrong amount. Maybe you wanted to put in 5 and you entered in 56. So certainly I just want it to be very clear that you can adjust down. You can fix any input errors that you may have. And again, you have this log available here on the eye on the information. It will show you this information in the log. Again, you can adjust this as well. So if you needed to make a change, you can go ahead and do that, and it will tally all that information and keep that host of changes for you. So it should be hopefully really user-friendly. It's fairly straightforward when you're entering data. The only 2 buttons that you may need to press in here are this plus sign where you can add to the total or, again, take away from the total if need be, or this information where it gives you an entire history of everything that's happened and any notes, and you can add as many notes as you need to. So hopefully it's a pretty easy tool to use because I know tracking data can add a lot to a task. So hopefully this makes it easy for you. Certainly if you don't want to use it as an ongoing tool because you have other data trackers, then of course you can just enter in your data here just as a one-off for each day. So it should be fairly straightforward. Just make sure that as you're reviewing your information as well, there are all these different tabs. So you can review that you have all the information for hours, visits, reference transactions, community resource referrals, public computer sessions, and Wi-Fi sessions. Just make sure that it's all complete for all the days. And that is it, really fairly straightforward, hopefully.
Wonderful. And we had just a couple more questions come in, mainly directed at myself. One is, can you speak about the year-to-date total for open hours? Are holidays included and accounted for? And my answer to that is your open hours are based on your average. So you don't need to take into account minor variances like holidays, or maybe you had to close early one day because of a unexpected snowstorm. So for you, that might be this typical week during count week. It very well might not be if you have something like different hours in the winter compared to the summer. But keep in mind, you can update that information in the public library survey. So use your average, and that's what we calculate off of. And then the other question is, will this be a separate login than the public library survey? And the answer to that is it's your same login. And then if you had branches, which I don't believe is the case for the person asking the question, but for others on the call, if you have branches, we are going to send your director logins for your branches as well so that you can share them directly with your branch managers. And then we have a couple questions that are more technical in nature regarding Wi-Fi users and how you can get at that information. To the question about my router gives me a daily average. Can I use that average? And the other question is, how do I get at the numbers through the router? I would refer both of you to your IT professional. That may be somebody at your city or county or a consultant, and they'll help you get to that information through the correct report. If you're getting a daily average, I think what we'd more be looking for is how many on that specific day for during count week. So we can chat more offline about how to get at the best data for your Wi-Fi sessions as well. And then if you don't have any Wi-Fi sessions, you want me to enter 0. Instead, if it's actually 0, you had no users of Wi-Fi, enter 0. If you can't count your Wi-Fi, go ahead and leave blank. I'm just going to pause for a moment to see if we have any more questions coming in. And just to clarify, there was one more question about logins. Everyone uses the same login. You'll use your same login that you use for your public library survey, Federation grant, and public library standards. Unless you have a branch, then they get a new login that we'll share with you. All right, feel free to keep sending questions in. I am going to just share my screen one more time here. And one question did come in. Staff entering data would use the same login as the director. That is correct. Or what could happen is the director or the person he has designated could log it in and put it open on the computer for that person without having to expose their password. Or if there's a security concern there, we could also change the password and then change it to something else after count week too. Which brings up something that I wanted to mention. So support during count week or before count week. The best way to get a hold of staff is to reach out through the state library's help desk. And so if you wanted to do something like change your password, that's a great example of something you could reach out to the help desk for, and we could set a password for you that you feel comfortable using with your staff through that week. And I wanted to mention that a recording will be available after we finish today. I'm going to send that out via Gov Delivery to all the directors, both at public and tribal college libraries. Do feel free to share that recording with your staff if you have staff that will be helping collect data and can benefit from the training. I wanted to, in addition to the help desk, provide contact information for myself and Tracy. We're always available to help you out if you're stuck or if you have more questions, including, you need help understanding the definition a bit more. Please reach out. I'm happy to help you with that. I'm also always available via phone call too, if you would prefer. And then finally, I just wanted to thank you for participating in this training. I'm really excited for all of you to participate in Count Week. I think it's going to give us a lot of very useful data and stories that we can use to talk about the library. Please take a moment to fill out our training evaluation. There's a QR code up on the screen. And there's also a link if you would prefer to use that instead of the QR code, and we can paste that link into the chat as well. And do we have a link to the marketing materials ready? That's going to be coming out with the video, so those will be coming to you very soon here. And we still have some time if anybody has any more questions that they would like to ask while we're on the call. And just a moment here, I'll have that link to our training eval too. And yeah, we can stop the recording as well.